I'm DQ and this is On the Money. This is a channel where we talk about anything money, might be business, finance, investing, stocks, bonds, the economy, whatever it might be. If it's got a dollar sign in it, we're going to talk about it. In this video, I'm going to talk about negative gearing and what exactly is it. If you're an Aussie, you've probably heard about it, but we're going to go through in finer detail how it comes about and what it means for your tax. I'm going to go through some examples to show you just that, as well as when it works and when it doesn't. Because like with any investment, using debt can be a double-edged sword, even with the so-called good debt. If you lose your job or if the market takes a turn against you, this can create real financial problems for you. But when it does work, it can prove quite effective and it can really help you along on your wealth building journey. But it's critical that you understand the fundamentals of this strategy so that you can avoid the pitfalls. Okay, now the definition of negative gearing per Wikipedia reads, negative gearing is a form of financial leverage whereby an investor borrows money to acquire an income-producing investment and the gross income generated by the investment is less than the cost of owning and managing the investment, including depreciation and interest charged on the loan. The policy has been around in one form or another for quite a while, but it was the Hawke-Keating government who in 1985 legislated so that your rental losses could be offset against other income, such as from your job. Before this change, rental losses were quarantined to the property, so you couldn't offset them against your other income. But now that you were allowed to offset it against your other income, you can use this to reduce your tax bill. The idea was that the policy change would provide an incentive for people to go out, buy a property, rent it out to the general public. This would then increase housing supply, which would put downward pressure on rents and would therefore make renting more affordable for the general public. So here I have a little supply and demand graph that I put together. On the x-axis, you can see we have quantity. This is the number of houses that are available for rent on the market. On the y-axis, we have rent. This is the cost to rent a house. The blue line is demand. The red line is supply. Now we have the equilibrium here with supply and demand, and you can see it moves over to the right here. Now as we do that, the equilibrium also moves down to this point here. And what that does is it creates a higher supply of housing. You can see it moves over there, the quantity moves up. But at the same time, the rental price decreases because the supply has gone up, demand has stayed the same, and this has the effect of reducing the price to rent a home. It was also designed to increase construction activity that would then stimulate the property sector, which would create flow-on benefits to the broader economy. But it must be said that the policy is not without its critics, and it actually became a pretty big issue in the 2019 federal election. The argument is that the tax breaks favour the wealthy and they contribute to people on lower incomes being priced out of the market. Okay, so the idea is that investors take losses, especially in the early years, while holding out for capital gains in the medium to longer term. And the effect of the negative gearing is that when an investor takes a tax loss on the property, that loss can then be offset against their other income to reduce their overall tax bill or increase their tax refund. And I know it does sound counterintuitive. Like, why would you want to invest in something just to lose money? It makes no sense. So let me go through an example of how it works, and it should make more sense after that. Okay, so here I have an example of a rental schedule. This is something similar to what comes out of your tax return. So up the top here, we got rent collected $15,000, advertising, your various expenses $300, body corporate, your strata fees $2,000, cleaning, council rates, depreciation. I've highlighted this because this is a non-cash expense. I'll come back to that. Gardening insurance, interest on the loan, agent fees for managing the property, repairs, water, $20,000 total expenses to make a net rent loss of $5,000. So the thing about depreciation is this is a non-cash expense. This is not something that you've physically had to fork out money for like all this other stuff. It's a write down in the value of the fixtures and fittings and the building of a property. You could almost take this out because it is a non-cash expense. And now you can see we got 15 income, 15 expense to make a net rent of 0 as far as cash in, cash out goes. But okay, so we add the depreciation back in and we've got the net rent loss of 5,000. Even though for physical money in and out, you broke even just. Now in this example, we're bringing over the $5,000 tax loss that we just went through. So let's say with no negative gearing, you had a job, you earned $65,000. The tax payable on that job income is about $12,800. Now with the negative gearing, you bring over the $5,000 tax loss that we just went through. This offsets against your job income of $65,000 to make your taxable income now $60,000. The tax payable is now $11,000, which means you've had a tax saving of $1,800. Now, the higher the tax bracket in, the higher the tax savings will be, but people in lower and middle brackets still use this as part of their investment strategy. And especially with newly built properties, there are massive deductions available, or there can be, for depreciation. And this can really increase your net loss figure and can therefore really increase your tax refund. But you should also be aware that the depreciation is factored back into the cost base when it comes time to sell your property. So there's no completely free lunch on that. It's quite common for investors using negative gearing to take out an interest-only loan, meaning that they're paying the interest only and not the principal, as this will reduce their monthly out-of-pocket expenses. And provided the value of the property increases over time by more than what it's costing you to hold the asset, this technique will work fine, because what will happen is inflation will push up the value of the property while at the same time eating away at the real value of the debt. So in this example here, we can see if you bought a house in 2010 for $450,000 with a deposit of $50,000, that means you had a loan of $400,000 and also equity of $50,000. Now, if you sold this house 10 years later in 2010, and there was growth at 6.8%, which this has been the average growth rate over the past 25 years, according to Aussie Home Loans. So we can see here, the capital gain over the past 25 years equates to an annual growth rate of 6.8% for houses and 5.9% for units in dollar value terms. Okay, so if we use that 6.8% over 10 years, that translates into a value of $868,000. And say you had interest-only loans, so you haven't paid any of that down, and the amount owing remains at $400,000. That means if you sell now, you now have equity of $468,000 after paying out the loan, and your profit will be $418,000. So this all sounds great, but if the property doesn't go up in value, it can create some real problems. For example, in Perth, the market has been going down since 2014, and this has left a lot of people there in a situation called negative equity. This basically means your property is worth less than how much you owe the bank. So if you sold up now, settled all your debts, it would mean you still owe the bank money. And this is why, with me personally, being quite conservative, I always prefer to go for principal and interest repayments. This means that even if the market is tanking and the value of the property isn't going up, at least I'm still paying down some principal, which means the loan amount is getting smaller and my interest is getting smaller, which means as the interest gets smaller and smaller and smaller each month, I'm paying down more and more of the principal each month. So I'm still getting wealthier in the sense that my debt is going down. And I know there'll be plenty of investors out there who will disagree with using P&I, and I'm not saying any particular strategy is superior to the other. All I'm doing here is giving you the options so that you can make your own decision. And that decision will come down to your personal financial situation, your risk tolerance, and also your investment strategy. For example, are you a buy and hold investor, or are you looking for cash flow? But as the saying goes, there's only one way to go bankrupt, and that's by having too much debt. So just keep this in mind, because house prices don't always go up. And while leverage can really put a rocket under your wealth creation, it can also cut both ways. And if the market takes a turn against you, that cut can be deep. There's certainly nothing wrong with using negative gearing to get ahead, but I would recommend just having some solid cash reserves behind you so that if things do get ugly, you can bail the investment out, or if some unexpected repairs come up, you have the money to keep you going. I'll also quickly mention that even though negative gearing is almost always associated with property, it can be used for other things like shares as well by taking on a margin loan. But taking on debt to invest in an asset class as volatile as a share market can indeed be a risky endeavor, and it's not something I would do. Anyway, folks, that's it for the vid. If you found this informative, I'd really appreciate it if you could give that like button a bit of a whack. If you want to see more on investing and money, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comment section what your experience has been with negative gearing. As always, I'd love to hear your stories. All right, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.